Hello, my name is Lynn Mid, and I'd like to talk today about student engagement in an online course. I was writing a grant recently, and it asked me, what is the objective, and how will you know you succeeded? I think those are good questions that we could ask anytime we teach a class, but particularly with the online courses. When I think about that, I think about the answer to this being, how do I know I succeeded? And the answer for me is when students are engaged. When students are engaged with the material, they're interested, and they learn what is taught. I think I'm successful when students are engaged with other students. They collaborate with other students. They talk about the things that they've learned with other students. I think I'm successful when they are engaged with me as the instructor. They trust me enough to ask questions, to inquire more, to come to my office to talk to me about their materials or how the material influences their life in some way. I think I'm successful when they're engaged with the community, when the things that they learn in class extend to their families, to their workplace, to their friendships. They talk about and they use what they've learned in my classes. A set of researchers define student engagement as a student's willingness, need, desire, and compulsion to participate in and be successful in the learning process, promoting higher level thinking for enduring understanding. I'd like to define for you what it looks like in my course that I teach at the University of Arkansas. So let's talk about my class. I teach a nonverbal communication class to sophomore level students. I'm in the Department of Communication at the University of Arkansas. The class I teach is fully online. So the first thing I want is my students to be engaged with the material. I did a mid-semester assessment and asked students how it was working for them, what was good about the class, what I could do better. And this was some of the feedback that I got. I really enjoy the different videos and how they relate to the coursework. It makes the course feel more like a hobby than homework. So at least from this student's perspective, they like it, they're engaged, and it's interesting. But I think it's very, very important that when we look at engagement, it's not just that they like the course, but that there's objectives for the course and the students are meeting the objectives for this course. So I actually took a screenshot of 1 week from my class in nonverbal communication. You can see that each week it has an introduction and then it has some objectives. So for example, the first two objectives, describe the differences in individualistic and collectivistic culture. Deconstruct the Nasarima. What does it mean? How does it relate to America? So in my mind, every week, I clearly define what I want students to learn. I write down what I want students to learn. I tell them what I want them to learn. All of the readings, all of the lessons, the videos, all the homework is defined to that end. And one student commented on this assessment, quote, "The objectives at the beginning of the week's lessons really help me know what to look for in the week's videos, readings, and the PowerPoint. It tells us exactly what we should expect and what we should know for the test." So here's another screenshot that I took. This is of the second part of the weekly objectives. Following that, it tells them specifically what it is that they're supposed to do to help meet those objectives. So for example, in this week, they have a reading from the Nasarima. They have an online article about cultural etiquette in the United States. They have something that they have to be engaged with on eDiplomat. So it's not just passive reading, but they get to pick the country and they get to read about a particular country. They have textbook readings as well. In this case, it's about greetings from across the world. And then I made them a handout specifically of principles that I want them to learn. In addition to the reading, they're watching videos. Oftentimes I find videos on YouTube or from other sources, and they'll watch those, and those videos will be followed by a short quiz that helps me know that they watched the video and got the content. And then the other thing they do is in this class, every week they have a discussion prompt and they talk about some aspect of what they learned from the class with other students. And the expectation is that they're going to include information from the readings and things that they've learned so far. So in the black box, we see student feedback. One student said, I love the different types of material presented, the book, website, articles, videos. And the topic is interesting, that I find myself reading for curiosity, and it doesn't feel like homework. So as a teacher, this makes me happy that not only is the student doing the homework, but they desire to know and do more. The next thing that the students do is they engage in a community group. And that's always defined with the objectives and clearly told what they're supposed to do. So again, I screenshotted something out of my class, and it says, click the community group discussion link above, go to the group's discussion, post. This is more interesting if you try to use people of different ages, sex, and races. It's also fun to add a smoker to the mix. Please use your phone or other recording photographic device to do the following. Take picture of 7 friends, have those same 7 friends read the following sentence and record only their voice. And then in short, it tells them to take pictures of their friends, record their voice, and then have different friends look at those pictures and see if they can match the picture to the voice. I included this because this was one of the favorite assignments that students have had in the class so far, and I included several quotes from students about it. I rather enjoyed this week's assignment. The results I got were much different than I expected, which made things much more interesting. I was really excited when I started this experiment. This was such an interesting experiment this week. I've always told people I could match a face with a voice, so this week I was able to test that theory. Look at the words they use. Enjoyed, interesting, excited, interesting. Test their theory. So it sounds like from this feedback, the students are not only enjoying it, but they're engaged with the material. The next thing I think that I need to do in order for a class to be considered successful is my students need to engage with other classmates. And feedback from one of my students said interacting with my group on a weekly basis helped me stay accountable. And so you can see from the community groups, not only did it give them something to be excited about, talk to the other classmates about, but they felt like they were accountable to the other students. And in fact, in this class, I have 30 students, and what I did was I broke them into groups of 5. And online, the only other students they see in the class are those 5. So not only were they connected with the material, but they were connected with their group. And in doing so, that helps them to learn more. So here's another example of a community group. In this community group, for example, they're asked to, number 1, describe an intercultural encounter. Write about a time you encountered someone whose culture was different from your own. Describe nonverbal differences. Now that you know more about nonverbal and culture, how can you reinterpret some of the differences you encounter? Talk about something from the reading or videos that clarifies your encounter in some way. Number 2, describe a time that you were ethnocentric or encountered someone who acted in an ethnocentric manner. So each one of the students would post about their encounters, and they would use the vocabulary that they learned from the chapter, so therefore they had to internalize it. But then they had to come back at the end of the week and they had to read the stories from other students and they had to comment on them. So that way the learning is not just coming from the reading and the things that I say, but they're learning from one another as well. The next thing I think I need to do as an instructor to be successful is the students need to be engaged with me. One student said, quote, the feedback I've gotten from the assignments has been the best I've ever had in a class. You should teach professors about this because you are doing it in a way that I wish everyone would. I also love the enthusiasm and personal stories you give in the feedback sometimes. It makes me feel as if you read everything I say and you also care about what I say. Online classes tend to lose out on the enthusiasm aspect of the professor's passion. A few things that I do to help the students be engaged with me is when I send out emails, I always send out 1 or 2 personal sentences. Something like, the weather's beautiful here, I've been gardening and have a hard time finding myself coming out of the garden to do real work. How's your week been? Another item that a student said, I cannot stress enough how much I appreciate the feedback for my assignments. When I did not get full points on a discussion one week, you gave me the exact reason and I was able to not make that mistake again. So part of the feedback is telling students not just check mark, you did bad, but if you want to make an A next time, you need to be sure to do this thing. So for example, I had one student who was struggling, and he said, no matter how much I try, I can't seem to get an A. So I sent him an email on how to get an A. And I was very clear. I said, I want you to get the full points on the discussion points. So let's see if I can help you out a little. I think I set the tone in the fact that I want to help this student. And so then I gave him specific examples, specific things to do. First, be sure to read all the details of the assigned prompt. For example, there were 4 items to be addressed for this week's discussion. For full points, you had to discuss all 4. And then I cut and pasted the 4 specific things the student was supposed to be talking about. Then I said, second, be sure to highlight something from the week's readings. I'm looking for clues that you have read and understand the week's materials and are able to relate it in some way. For this student, because they were struggling so much, I actually asked one of my A students if I could copy his assignment, show it to this other student so the student would know what an A paper looked like. So in this case, the students were supposed to talk on the topic of family rules and what their parents taught them about how to behave non-verbally. And the student said, as a jittery young child, I was immediately put in place by my parents. Stop staring, or you've got to stop rocking, were almost always told to me growing up. I used to vaguely think of memories such as these and or ones similar with little or no thought. Jumping into the content of this course, I can think of the overall attitudes and motives that my family had or might have. So when I was giving feedback to the student, I had it in several parts. One part of it said, I don't sway, but I sure wiggle a lot. And so the student had been talking about moving around, and so I highlighted on that. I don't sway, but I sure wiggle a lot. I often sit in the back row when I go places so my movement doesn't distract others. So I highlighted the fact that I'd at least been paying attention, that they moved and that they wiggled, and that I did that too. The other thing that I did is when this student came back and was commenting on the posts of others, I affirmed their good behavior. So I said, I like how you reflect on how we learn and use these today. Good job elaborating on the ideas of others and connecting your own experiences with things that others have said. Finally, I find myself successful when students are engaged beyond the classroom. So I asked my students, have you ever shared the content with somebody outside of class? Give me examples. And these were the things the students said. I've shared several of the ideas in the text and videos with my wife and kids and some with coworkers as well. My coworkers and I uploaded images into the facial measurement site to determine our symmetry. I read some of the etiquette suggestions for foreign countries to my children, and we discussed the possible reasons for different cultural nonverbal preferences. So here's a student who shared it at work and at home. Another student said, I almost always tell my parents what the discussion post is over and talk it over with them before I write them. And I follow up and tell them what I ended up writing and what other people said. So here the student is telling their parents the things that they learned. Other comments. My boyfriend is a social worker. I've shared a lot with him about this class. He enjoys watching a lot of the videos with me when he's at my house. So not only are they sharing the discussion prompts, but they're letting this person watch the videos and they're discussing them with their boyfriend. Another quote. There's not been a week in this course that I've not mentioned something to my wife. Often I do this in the middle of reading or watching the week's material. At work, I often make comments to colleagues about things I've noticed. Finally, a student said I was recently in a leadership development program with coworkers from all over the country. We spent a great deal of the training talking about communication. One of the topics we discussed was how to interact with people from different cultures. I was able to bring in some of the information learned in this course to the discussion. So not only is this person sharing it with their coworkers, but those at a conference. So back to the original question. When I'm asked, what is my objective in teaching this course? How will I know when I've succeeded? I believe I've succeeded when students are engaged with the material, with other students, with the instructor, and with the community.